Last night, I had to evacuate my home in LA because of the fires, the effects of which you can see right above me. Upon reflecting, I remembered a conversation that Joe Rogan had with Donald Trump before the election about the state of wildfire management in California. It's very easy to think of wildfires as something that Mother Nature just inflicts upon us, but we have an influence over both the intensity and the frequency of these fires. And Donald Trump pointed out that there's two things that we've done in California that might be exaggerating the effects of these fires. The first is our policy around water management, and the second is our policy around clearing deadwood in our forests. Check this out.
Los Angeles, you can't get proper amounts of water.
Right.
And it's unbelievably expensive. And they're actually thinking about rationing water. Can you believe it? I was in the farm court country with some of the congressmen. We're driving up a highway. And I say, how come all this land is so barren? It's farmland, and it looked terrible. It was just brown and bad. I said, but there's always that little corner that's so green and beautiful. They said, we have no water. I said, do you have a drought? No, we don't have a drought. I said, why don't you have no water? Because the water isn't allowed to flow down. It's got a natural flow from Canada all the way up north of water, more water than they could ever use. And in order to protect a tiny little fish, the water up north gets routed into the Pacific Ocean. I could have water for all of that land. Water for your forests. You know, your forests are dry as a bone.
Yeah.
Okay?
Dangerous.
That water could be routed. You know, you could have everything. Oh, not only dangerous, billions of dollars a year they spend on forest fires.
Now, let's look at specifically what Trump was referring to here. In 2023, California implemented what's called the Fall X2 policy. This is a policy that's designed to redirect water away from areas that endanger a specific species of fish called the Delta smelt. Proponents of this policy argue that the Delta smelt are important to indigenous populations, as well as important for the overall health of certain other endangered species in that area, like the Chinook salmon or killer whales. And that sounds good, but let's look at what the cost of protecting the Delta smelt actually is. In 2023, we dumped 195.5 billion gallons of water into the Pacific Ocean. That's water that could have been used for firefighting or watering farmlands. This is all happening while we're focusing on scarcity conservation-based policies, while we're dumping $200 million worth of water into the ocean to protect a relatively niche species. Now, that's how we've been wasting our water, but what about our forests?
And you know, there's a case with the environment. They're not allowed to rake their forests because you're not allowed to touch it. When a tree falls down, after 18 months, it becomes very dry. It's like, you know, like real firewood. It's bad. But when a tree is up, it sucks water. It's wet. I went to they had a couple of horrible forest fires in California, and I said, you know, you got a lot of trees standing. Yes, they were healthy trees, sir. I said, with this intense heat, that you could see they were charred a little bit on the bottom, but they were going to be all right because they're soaking wet because they suck up the water, right? But when they fall,
right,
they're like, you know, it's like lighting a match.
Yeah.
And you got to be able to clean. They call it maintain your forest. So I was with the head of Austria. He said, you know, it's a shame. I see all those forest fires in California, and all they have to do is clean their forest, meaning rake it up, get rid of the leaves, get rid of, you know, leaves that are sitting there for 5 years. And
we'll certainly get rid of the dead fall.
And get rid of the trees that have fallen.
I think that's the real issue.
You know, environmentally, they don't want to do that. They said, you know, it's got to be nature and all this stuff.
Is there some truth to Trump's claim? It turns out yes. A 2024 study found that approximately 91.4 million dead trees were spread over 27.8 million hectares of land in California. Many people in the environmental lobby will argue that we need to preserve this deadwood actually because it contributes to the natural habitat that many endangered species rely upon. But here's an example of where trying to do good actually ends up doing bad. For approximately 10 years, there was an environmental lobby that opposed clearing deadwood in the Klamath National Forest because they were trying to protect the natural habitat of spotted owls and endangered species. This caused a multi-year legal battle that ironically resolved itself when the Klamath National Forest ended up actually burning down because of the deadwood that they were trying to use to protect the spotted owl population. These kinds of misguided attempts to protect the environment in California not only keep on ruining the environment, it's ruining human lives. And here's my personal frustration. California has the best land and the worst government in the United States. We have incompetent politicians who constantly focus on things that sound good while actually doing bad. And they focus on first-order consequences while ignoring second-order consequences. They constantly focus on popular slogans like needing to protect our environment and climate change and protecting the fish and protecting the trees while ignoring the second-order impact on humans. And ironically, like in the case of the spotted owls, in their attempt to protect endangered species, not only are they harming humans, oftentimes they're not even protecting the endangered species. And to take this a step further, I think California's government represents a dysfunctional, far-left worldview that is consistently not producing results, is just producing heated conversations. We spend more money on homelessness every year, while the amount of homeless people just keeps on increasing every year. We have reasonable people who are afraid to speak up because we don't want to be labeled as climate change deniers just for questioning some of these dysfunctional environmental protection policies. We have a governor in Gavin Newsom who left San Francisco a failed city and is slowly turning California into a failed state. This is the same governor, by the way, that during COVID recommended that we quarantine at home while he dined at the French Laundry. Ultimately, in moments of crisis like this, I am grateful that we have a government, but our government could be doing a lot better.